Grokter and his 5 huge orc guards stormed out of the gate, their heavy feet pounding the ground. The guards were puffing hard, struggling to keep up with Grokter's fast pace. Once he saw they were all there, Grokter nodded sharply at the orc who had brought the news. "Lead the way," he commanded. The orc bowed quickly and took off, Grokter and his team right behind. Grokter's eyes gleamed with fury. Those high orcs were in for it. They'd messed up a hunt that was too important to ignore. Meanwhile, Jong-soo stood alone, staring at a swarm of magic beast ants. "Bus," he muttered, frustration rising in his voice. He shook his head and whispered, "I need to think." Suddenly the air erupted with sounds. Scrosser, crossa, cross, crossa, gross. He felt a strong urge to just quit the raid right there. And then... "Hey, isn't that the giant ant with wings on its back? The one that messed with those S-rank hunters on Jeju Island? Just thinking about how much magic power it has gives me the chills. If it turns on us, we're in serious trouble." Jong-soo couldn't help but admire those brave S-rank hunters, who had faced such a terrifying creature. But then something odd popped into his head. Wait a second. Doubts started to creep in. Who was this guy Jin-Woo Sung? Anyway, and Hunter Sung took down this monster all by himself. No way. His mind went into overdrive thinking about it. But then he told himself, chill out. You're probably overthinking. He shook his head to clear the fog. Whatever Jin-Woo Sung's deal was, or how strong he really was, it didn't matter right now. Jong-soo was stuck. Should they keep going with this raid, even with those beasts around? If they quit now, how would he face the reporters waiting outside? What would I tell them, he thought? That we stopped, because Hunter Sung left, or that we were too afraid of the creatures he brought to help us? Either way, it sounded bad. The guild would be a joke. Jong-soo clenched his teeth. No way they were quitting. Those minions couldn't be. That's tough, right? Thinking of them as just Jin-Woo's sidekicks made Jong-soo feel better. With newfound confidence, Jong-soo looked around, feeling braver, but then Baru approached. And oh no. His confidence vanished in an instant. He managed a shaky shout. "We go," but Baru didn't even flinch. Jong-soo stood there, staring at Baru, wondering if he wasn't being polite enough, trying to be even more respectful. He stammered, "Shall we go, sir?" But Baru still didn't move. The longer Jong-soo looked into those black glowing orbs of the king ant, the weirder he felt like his brain was getting foggy from the strong mana radiating from them. Just then Yoon-tae walked up behind him. "Are we gonna keep going with these guys?" Jong-soo snapped at his subordinate, taking the vice president's push as an excuse to let out some steam. "I told you to be quiet," he barked. He held back from saying what he really wanted. "Why don't you step up and tell everyone we're quitting?" Jong-soo shot a hard look at Yoon-tae for a moment, then turned back to Baru and gulped nervously. He really wanted out of this awkward moment. ASAP. Is this thing not moving, because it doesn't get what I'm saying? Jong-soo thought. He decided to try a different approach, forced a grin, and pointed down a dark passageway deeper into the dungeon. Front, he said. Then, pop, as a muffled sound, like a silenced gunshot, and the giant ant just vanished. Wait, where did it go? Just as Jong-soo was about to go search for Baru, he appeared out of nowhere. Aztac. Baru held up something in his hand, slapping it against his palm with a wet tack sound. What? What is that? Jong-soo's eyes went wide, and his voice trembled as he asked. Now that he got a better look, Jong-soo realized it was the head of some kind of monster. But not just any monster. It was the head of a Death Knight, one of the most powerful undead creatures out there. The empty eye sockets stared back at him creepily, and even though it was just a head, Jong-soo could tell how intimidating this thing must have been when it was alive. And to make matters worse, Death Knights were infamous for being nearly impossible to defeat. So why did Baru have one's head? And where did he even find it? Jong-soo couldn't believe what he was seeing. This was definitely not your average monster. It was something way bigger than that. The beast's head had been torn off. Helmet and everything. Jong stared in horror before collapsing to the ground with a loud ag. The strike team huddled around him, totally freaked. Baru glanced at the group of hunters before shouting orders to the other ants. With a careless flick, she tossed the Death Knight's head aside like it was trash. The army of ants moved forward as one, their sharp voices rising in a chilling cry. Skadara! Baru silently looked down at Jiangsu, then turned and followed her fellow ants. The hunters leaned over their leader, concerned. Boss. President Park. Are you okay? Are you alright? Jiangsu lay there looking like all the energy had been sucked out of him. Alright, here we go. Jiangsu brushed himself off, trying to look tougher than he felt. Yeah, I'm totally fine. Honestly, his body was okay. But inside, his heart felt heavy, like someone had punched him in the chest. He couldn't shake the feeling that the minion had somehow made fun of him. Like seriously, minions aren't exactly geniuses or anything. There's no way it could have done that on purpose. Right? So. But even if he felt silly for thinking it, Jiangsu wasn't about to quit now. Not after all the humiliation he'd just gone through. Nope. He was sticking with this raid. No matter what. He stood up, patted the dirt off his clothes, and got ready to keep going. Come on. We need to get moving too, Jiangsu said. The other hunters stared at him like he was crazy. Hun, one of them asked, raising an eyebrow. You really want us to follow those guys? Are you serious? Another hunter protested. How are we supposed to pull off a raid with those monsters around? No way, I'm out. On two. Someone else agreed. Jiangsu let out a frustrated sigh. Did he really have to explain this? He picked up the severed head of a death knight that had been tossed aside, and held it up for everyone to see. Whoa, one of them gasped. Is that a death knight's head? Another hunter asked, their voice trembling. The veteran hunter's eyes widened as they recognized the helmet. A death knight. Someone whispered, and the group erupted into nervous murmurs. Jiangsu stayed calm as he explained his plan. Guys, you know how super valuable essence stones from top-tier magic beasts are, right? The other hunters gulped hard. All we need to do is trail behind them and grab the essence stones, Jiangsu said with a grin. Just as he expected, smiles started spreading across the strike squad's faces like wildfire. He asked one last question. Anyone want to back out now? The hunters moved in perfect sync, almost like a well-trained team. What are we waiting for, boss? Someone called out. Let's move. Already, another hunter urged. You'll get left behind. Don't just stand there. Boss, Jiangsu muttered. These people, honestly. And with that, the Knights Guild's raid continued. Jin-Woo kept his gaze fixed below. Roads, cars, buildings, rivers, trees, then a mountain, another mountain, and another flew by in a blur. The scenery was changing fast. He's really moving. When Kaisel wasn't being held back, he could fly at incredible speeds. If Jin-Woo were just a regular guy, and not a high-ranking hunter, moving at this crazy speed would have been fatal. But even as a top-tier hunter, Jin-Woo was getting desperate. The signals from his soldiers were fading fast, and to make things worse, Tets, Eps, Ept, Ep, Emp, 8, 6, 1, 19, 8, 7, 78 at some point along the way. His mana had started dropping, his energy was running out, and he knew he had to act fast. This was way worse than Jin-Woo had imagined. The elite shadow warriors were getting wiped out, and having to regrow from scratch. Whoever else whatever's was powerful enough to take down these shadow soldiers was a major threat to Gina. Jin-Woo's face turned stone-cold serious. Even if this enemy didn't lay a finger on Gina, he was still going to tear it to pieces without mercy. His eyes gleamed sharp as knives. Faster! Kaisel roared, urging his team onward with a fierce battle cry. The High Orcs were tough, but they didn't stand a chance against Grokter, the fearsome Orc chieftain. Grokter swatted its own warriors aside like annoying bugs, and stepped into the fight. With ease it dodged the clumsy swings of the High Orcs, and yanked out the curved sword hanging at its side. Is that all you can do? It taunted, sounding almost bored. The battlefield was already littered with around 50 Orc bodies, and Grokter had just gotten started. 50 of its fighters had been taken down by these 3 High Orcs. Come on, you 3. Grokter roared, swinging his sword with fierce anger. The blade sliced through their armor like it was paper. Us! Das! But the cries didn't come from the High Orcs. They came from the humans behind them. Grokter's brow furrowed in confusion. What was going on here? Pesky creatures. After dealing with those tough High Orcs, these noisy pests were next in line. Grokter swung his sword, slicing off a High Orc's arm, in one smooth motion, and then quickly cutting its throat. He looked like he was already bored with the fight. Aunch! The orcs who had been pushed back outside the classroom by their enemies suddenly erupted in cheers. Grokter, they shouted over and over. But wait a second. Grokter's eyes widened in shock as the headless high orc started to glow, turned into black smoke, and then poof, appeared again like nothing had happened. Was this some kind of magic spell? This weird thing kept happening over and over. Grokter let out an enraged roar. Grokter. Grokter swung his weapon again and again, cutting down high orc after high orc, but no matter how many times he struck them down, they just wouldn't stay dead. They kept coming back for more. He could kill them 100 times, even 1,000. But the battle seemed endless. All the while, a voice in Grokter's head wouldn't stop nagging him. Kill humans, it repeated over and over, pounding against his skull like a relentless drum. The constant pressure gave him a throbbing headache, making it hard to focus on anything else. But Grokter couldn't just ignore those high orcs killing humans either. It had to finish this. The beast thought hard about what to do next. If these high orcs were soldiers created by magic, someone must be controlling them. After all its battles over the years, Grokter knew how to stop tricks like this. Then it spotted her, the human woman standing a little ways back, holding her breath. She was connected to the high orcs in some way, though weakly. Grokter's eyes blazed with fury. Is it you? The beast turned its anger toward this new target. Gina locked eyes with Grokter for just a second, but that was enough. She looked nervous, like she knew something she wasn't supposed to. Grokter acted on instinct and pointed at Gina, while yelling over its shoulder. Kill the girl. Toss. Even before Grokter finished speaking, its bodyguards jumped into action. They had been watching the fight from a distance, but now they were moving fast. Meanwhile, the high orcs ignored Grokter completely. Instead, they stepped in to block the guards. I knew it. Grokter had been right. It sneaked up to Gina while the high orcs were busy with something else. So it was you, Grokter said, grabbing her neck with one hand. Gina couldn't even make a sound because of the tight grip on her throat. Grokter tilted its head, thinking about how thin and fragile her neck was. It could snap it with just a little squeeze. Could this human really cast high-level spells that made warriors immortal? There was only one way to find out. I'll get my answer when I kill her. Just as Grokter was about to squeeze the life out of the girl, Skra tied lay, true to the rescue. Grokter froze. What just happened? Time felt like it slowed down, and its sharp warrior instincts went into high alert. Ba dump. The sound of its racing heartbeat pounded in its ears. It had to escape, or else it would die. Grokter's warrior instincts were sharp, almost like a superpower that could predict danger like right now. With lightning-fast reflexes, he let go of the girl and sprinted toward the exit like a wild animal. Suddenly, ska boom. A deafening explosion rocked the room, sending shards of glass flying everywhere. The orcs at the door staggered back in surprise as their leader appeared out of nowhere in front of them. Grokter took slow, careful breaths. Watching the chaos quietly, he could feel an unusual energy coming from a human male he'd never seen before. The man now stood where the girl had been. Grokter's eyes darted to the opposite corner of the room, where the windows were. One whole wall was completely gone, like it had been smashed by a giant catapult. Had Jin-Woo burst through the window, Grokter, with its super sharp eyesight, still couldn't track Jin-Woo's movements. The sudden arrival of such a strong foe made Grokter gulp. A drop of sweat trickled down its temple, then came a deafening roar. Say-R-E-E. Something felt off about Grokter today. Above them, a powerful foe circled like a hawk eyeing its next meal. This could turn into one tough battle. The enemy didn't even glance at Grokter, or the others, though it was too busy checking on the female. Grokter stepped forward and boomed. I'm Grokter, leader of the Red Blade tribe. Only the most dangerous opponents got that kind of introduction. After introducing himself, Grokter asked, Who are you? Jin-Woo looked up and said quietly, Be quiet, and stay right there. The orc was shocked. Could this human really speak their language? But the surprise didn't last long. None of the orcs, not even Grokter, dared to move after hearing Jin-Woo's firm words. Jin-Woo turned his attention to his sister. He rubbed her back gently and checked her for injuries. Thankfully, she seemed okay, except for a clear handprint on her neck. Jin-Woo frowned, his expression darkening with concern. Are you okay? Gina's brother asked calmly. As soon as her coughing stopped, Gina flung her arms around him, tears streaming down her face. He gently ran his hand through her hair, just like he used to when she was little. Big brother. Wait a second. If she's Jina's brother. Oh, the other students' eyes widened as they finally figured it out. Standing in front of them was none other than Jin-Woo Sung, the famous S-rank hunter. They were saved. The students erupted in tears. But this time it wasn't because they were scared or hopeless. It was because they were finally safe. Jin-Woo's sister sobbed uncontrollably. He held her tight, trying to calm her down. It's okay. You're okay now, he whispered softly. While comforting his sister, Jin-Woo scanned the entire school with his heightened senses. To his surprise, there were no other humans on campus, only the 17 people in this classroom. His face fell as a shadow of worry crossed his expression. Gently he untangled himself from his sister's clinging arms, and summoned an army of shadow soldiers, one for each student. Follow my minions, Jin-Woo instructed. They'll keep you safe. The students nodded bravely, and the shadow soldiers carefully picked them up to carry them away. Jin-Woo made sure Gris, one of his strongest soldiers, stayed close to Jina. Go ahead, he said. I've got this. See you downstairs, Jina said, her voice steady despite the tension. Normally she'd want her brother by her side, even if he was a top-ranked hunter, but today felt different. Jin-Woo's serious expression made her pause, so she nodded and agreed without pushing further. Jin-Woo signaled, and one by one, soldiers jumped through broken windows, each carrying a student to safety. The orcs, furious at their escaping prey, growled and halted, when Jin-Woo turned with a fierce stare. I told you to wait, he commanded, freezing the monsters in place. None of them dared challenge Jin-Woo's intense stare. One orc, looking pretty pale and nervous, kept a close eye on Jin-Woo, as he whispered to his leader. Sir, Grokter just said. Shush. This wasn't the time to worry about the weak. A true hunter was right in front of them, and they knew better than to mess with him. The moment of truth had arrived. It was time to see who would come out on top. But I wasn't about to let them get away without a fight. Grokter signaled silently, and in an instant 2 guards appeared out of nowhere. Jin-Woo glanced back once more, making sure every student was safe and sound before turning his attention to the danger ahead. Jin-Woo didn't send them away because he worried they might get hurt. These were just orcs and Jin-Woo knew he could handle them fast. However, he didn't want his sister or the other kids to see what was about to happen. Without anyone watching, Jin-Woo could let loose. Jin-Woo's head snapped toward the stairwell outside the classroom. 2 orcs who had been trying to stay hidden were creeping downstairs. Jin-Woo wasn't worried at all. Gris was right there with him, and Castle was keeping watch from above. All he needed to do now was take care of these orcs. He took a deep breath, and his breath shimmered with magic power. Grokter growled again. Who are you? How can you speak our language? Jin-Woo didn't bother answering. Instead, he just kept walking toward the orcs. Grokter bared his sharp teeth, realizing Jin-Woo wasn't going to say anything. Attack! The orc leader shouted. The warriors lunged at Jin-Woo with fierce cries of Groth and Groth. But from where Jin-Woo stood, it felt like the orcs were moving in slow motion. Jin-Woo dodged and weaved past the orcs, taking them down one by one without breaking a sweat. He didn't even bother pulling out a weapon, just a quick touch from his finger was all it took. The moment his fingertip made contact with an orc, their head, shoulder, arm, or stomach would burst into pieces. In the blink of an eye, more than 20 orcs were down for the count. Finally, Jin-Woo came to a stop right in front of Grokter, the massive orc chieftain. Grokter could barely see Jin-Woo move. He was just a blur leaving behind a trail of defeated enemies. Jin-Woo stood there like he'd been strolling through a park, while Grokter was left staring at the destruction around him. The orc's voice trembled. What the... Ugh. Before Grokter could swing its curved blade, Jin-Woo grabbed the monster's jaw with his left hand. The orc leader let out a sharp gasp as Jin-Woo strolled calmly forward and smashed its head against the wall. Bow! The loud crash echoed through the empty hall. Jin-Woo scanned the room from one end to the other, his eyes sweeping every corner. The hallway was covered in dead students. It was a terrible sight, but Jin-Woo didn't look away. He examined each body carefully, making sure whoever did this would face the consequences. His eyes locked back onto Grokter, and his voice was as cold as ice when he asked, Why? Why do your kind want to kill humans so badly? Or Jin-Woo asked, his voice filled with curiosity. Grokter, shaking in fear, whispered, There's this voice in our heads. It keeps telling us to kill humans. Jin-Woo frowned, puzzled. He had heard something like this before, but he always thought it meant hunters. Now, it seemed the message was much simpler and scarier. What about me? Jin-Woo asked, his eyes narrowing with suspicion. Does that voice tell you to kill me too? Jin-Woo moved in close, forcing Gokter to meet his gaze. What he saw in Jin-Woo's eyes made him rear back sharply.
Forgive me?
The tough warrior suddenly lost it, and started sobbing uncontrollably. Jin-Woo's anger started to fade as he stared at the terrified magic beast. I see. This creature didn't even realize he was human, just like all the others. Not that it mattered. Jin-Woo wasn't worried about what magic beast thought of him. He only cared about one thing: destroying them before they could harm people. Gokter sniffled and shook with fear, its body trembling in terror. Please, forgive. It sobbed. I'll forgive you, Jin-Woo replied coolly. He summoned the demon monarch's dagger into his right hand. But don't think getting forgiveness will be easy, he said. The strike squad from the Knights Guild gasped in shock as they watched the magic beasts clash. One of them cried. How is this even possible? This was anything but a normal raid. The undead magic beasts didn't stand a chance against the ants. The little creatures chomped down on them in seconds. Chomp chomp! The hunters watched in horror, their eyes nearly popping out of their heads. This is terrible, one hunter cried. If they keep eating like that, there'll be nothing left. Exactly, another hunter agreed. They're even gobbling up the super rare essence stones. The hunters were heartbroken as they watched those priceless treasures disappear into the ants' mouths. Yerim couldn't take it anymore and jumped in to act. Hey, that's worth a fortune. When she tried to retrieve the vampire's body, an angry soldier ant swung at her. Arg! The ant's claws slashed Yerim's arm, sending her flying backward. Whomp. Doh, she said, rubbing her sore bottom as she struggled to get up. Then she heard a fierce aux card, and looked up to see the same angry ant standing over her again. Yerim's heart nearly stopped, as the beast opened its huge jaws, ready to strike. She was frozen in fear, unable to move or scream. Just in time, Baru appeared out of nowhere. He grabbed the ant and spun it around, then glared straight into its face, just like Yerim had been challenged before. Skra, ash. Baru's thunderous roar echoed through the air, making Yerim jump. The ant trembled with fear, too scared to look up at someone so much stronger. Letting go of the ant, Baru stood tall as the creature scurried away in terror, its tiny legs moving as fast as they could. Baru walked up to Yerim, who looked a bit dazed, and offered her hand. Without thinking, Yerim took it, and Baru easily lifted her to her feet. Thank you, Yerim started to say, but her words stuck in her throat when she saw a faint blue light on Baru's fingers. Her eyes widened. Healing magic. The wound on her arm healed instantly, as the blue light touched it. After making sure the wound was healed, Baru shouted to the ants. Skirtilda. The ants stopped eating and moved deeper into the dungeon. Yerim watched Baru's go, and wondered, how does a minion heal better than I do? Hunters arrived at the school, and followed a mana compass upstairs. They detected strong magic on the 6th floor. The leader checked on the group. Be careful, he warned. His teammates nodded. They had reached the 6th floor when they finally found what they were looking for. A man with a bloody dagger stood there, surrounded by pieces of an orc he had just defeated. Is that? The leader of the strike squad felt his breath catch as their eyes met. Jin-Woo's intimidating glare. He took a deep breath and grabbed his radio. Yes, he replied.